down. Oh no. Oh no.
Here we are. This is my first review on the channel and ever. So I'm not really sure exactly how this is supposed to work. My plan is to start off with a quick kind of pitch for the book, delving into some of the elements, but not too deeply, staying spoiler free, so that if you haven't read the book but don't want any spoilers, you can figure out if it would be for you or not. And then after, I'm going to delve into kind of the fabric of the story and what I think makes it great or not great. And we'll kind of see how that goes. I'm still trying to figure out how this reviewing space works, but I figure I'll do what I always do. Make something up, watch it crash and burn, and then learn from the resulting catastrophe. So apologies for not knowing what I'm doing, but thanks for tuning in anyway. All right, let's get into it. The Door on Half-Bald Hill. I don't know if you can see that or if it's in there, but this book is fantastic. It blew me away for a number of reasons. And for one, I read it in the deep depths of horror of March 2020. And I was really struggling with kind of the brokenness of the world and kind of dealing with that. And for another, I had just made the executive decision to start building my paper library after years and years of reading only ebooks, because I traveled a lot and it was convenient. But I decided it was time, and so I got this book in the mail. And just look at this. Look at this for a second. Hold on. I'm probably going to put a picture up on the screen, but is this not gorgeous? And the art throughout is just so fantastic. Look at that. Look at that. It's so good. So I just the experience of opening this up and seeing all the things as the beginning of my paper library was just really, really fun. And I was immediately sucked into the book, and I was not disappointed. This was incredible. So a bit of background. This book is about the Bard of the Blackthorn, which is a young boy named Idris, who is one of the three spiritual leaders of his village. He's a prophet and a poet, and he feels rather useless because the world is literally ending. The blood moon, which is an element of the story, rose and brought poison waters, blighted crops, disease, famine, and there seems to be no way out of it. And that's one of the things the story does really well, is it captures the feeling of inevitability of this world's decline. And the story does it so well. There's no Dark Lord character to defeat. There's no army of orcs to fight. There's just this dreadful, slow death as the vitality and hope slowly drains away from everything good. And the conflict would be so much easier if you could just decide, this is the bad guy, this is who we're gonna fight. But the story doesn't let you do that. I think it's so brilliant. So it's fair to say that the story is really dark. It's really dark. It delves into sorrow and despair and what that does to people. But it also counters with hope. And I think it's really well done, because Idris is a hopeful character. And he's set in this dire, hopeless world. And it's this contrast between hope and despair that gives the darkness meaning, gives it context. And I won't go any further into that because spoilers, but there's a lot of themes of hope and life that run counter to the despair and existential dread, and it works really, really well. Okay, but a theme and a conclusion are only as good as the road you take to get there. And Sorenson knows exactly how the road works. I don't know if I mentioned, this book is by Helena Sorenson. She's a brilliant author. This is the only book of hers I've read, but fantastic. But the prose in this book is delightful. I'm gonna go in and just read it out loud because you gotta hear this for yourself. So I'm gonna crack open the first page and a half of the prologue. And so this isn't from Idris's point of view, but here we go. Those who have gathered in the inner grove await my words. Their forms are immaterial, and many cannot speak on this plane of existence. Yet they listen. They strain to hear the voice of the mighty sorcerer, the great druid. But how can I tell of the Tir Arsa that was, of the days before the coming of the Firbolg? Once the telling was sweet. Now I taste nothing but the bitterness of the path ahead. I close my eyes, open them. Sighing, I begin. Our people lived long, and the land yielded increase. The drinking horns overflowed. The forests bristled with wolves and bears and stags. A man could plunge his hand into the river and draw them out full of salmon. The celebrations of the eightfold wheel were so lively and high-spirited that one might roll on into the next, the solstice into harvest, or the equinox into new moon, without pause in a feast or dance. And the druids, my words falter, how deep the memory cuts. We were kings among men. In those days we drank from the wells of knowing as deep as the blue sea Gormara. For us, the moon and stars came close. The speech of animals unraveled mysteries, and the trees divulged their secrets. Again I hesitate. Silent fog moves through the grove, and the forms around me shift. My days are spent. Soon I must leave the sunlit lands to follow the path of our ancestors. I look on the gray faces gathered around me. I have made war. I have made peace. I have raised the groves of Balalian, and soon I will be on every plane as they are on this one. Gray, immaterial, emptied of the potency of my magic. Is that not, like, just so incredible? Like, the word choice and how she just creates these words, it's so immersive. And I cannot get enough of this stuff. It's so good. It reminds me a lot of Tolkien, the way she wrote. And in my eyes, that's a really, really high compliment. Also, like Tolkien, it's a bit of a slow burn. It's not flashy or punchy, but it takes its time to go deeper, not wider. And I think that's really important, and it's something this book does very, very well. It's contemplative, it's thoughtful, but I mean, it also has a lot of really great characters to get attached to, and also a really subtle and really great soft magic system. It's so soft-spoken you almost wouldn't call it a magic system, but I love it. It's really great. It's not like Allomancy, it's not like, again, it's very Tolkien-esque, where you're almost like, oh right, that's a magic system right there. And it's great. But yeah, this isn't a book to read if you're looking for like a light YA novel to cleanse your palate, or a bunch of quirky, colorful characters going on a fun quest. It's very specific in what it wants to accomplish, and it doesn't stray from that. It also doesn't have like the breadth and flair of most epic fantasy. No flashy combative magic systems or journeys through countries with unique cultures and languages. Its focus is pretty narrow, but if you're in it for the long haul, you like new books that feel old, and you're ready to like dive into something deep and rich and thoughtful, read this book, y'all. Read this book. It's so good. That's about all of my non-spoilery thoughts. I don't plan on going into full plot spoilers next, but I am going to be talking a lot more in depth and going into kind of like the fabric of the story. And, you know, we'll call it light to medium spoilers. So if you want to go in with as little information as possible, I'd click away now, and I'll see you in the next video. You gone? I'm waiting. Okay, good. So I kind of decided to make up a bunch of categories for fantasy stories in general, and that's going to be how I'm breaking down my in-depth thoughts. And I don't know if these are comprehensive. In fact, I'm pretty sure they're not. But what I've got so far is plot, world building, characters, prose, and theme. And so those are the 5 points I'm going to be digging into today. The plot, in my opinion, does not carry this book. Don't get me wrong, like, I love my Sandersons and my adventure stories, but Half-Bald Hill isn't one of them. It doesn't rely on plot to carry its message. when I come away from this book, the plot isn't what I remember. Let's put it that way. It's been a while since I've read it though. I brushed through it and I skimmed and got all the good bits so I could make this review. But like I said, I read it back in March 2020. So it's been a solid 2 years since I've read it in full. And I remember the pacing being a little weird. I wasn't paying that much attention to it. But honestly, in hindsight, that doesn't bother me. This book isn't about plot, and that's okay. The world building, though. The world building. Oh! Tir Arsa, which is the world in this story, was inspired by Ireland and like ancient Celtic folklore. So it has that distinct, oddly vague, oddly specific feeling that you get from reading old myths. But it isn't used in a way that makes the world feel confusing. It's used in a way that makes it feel real. Like there's a certain element of like, oh, maybe this isn't accurate, maybe I don't understand the full picture, that makes it feel like you're reading a story about something that actually happened. Feels like looking at a worn out old armchair with like smooth leather in the place where people would put their hands and like a pillow that's squashed where you can see where someone's back would be. It feels lived in, regardless of whether or not you see someone living in it at the moment. And that's what the world feels like. It feels so undeniably real. And like Sorenson spares no expense fleshing out the intricacies of place. I think that idea of place and like delving into that is really central to the book. And yet somehow she still managed to make the world feel close and intimate. Like over the entire course of the novel, we only really see 2 or 3 places. We see Blackthorn, which is the village. We see Half-Bald Hill. And then we see the trail in between them. And that's kind of it. Which is surprising for a fantasy story, because most fantasy stories rely on, all right, let's go everywhere. Let's explore every single corner of this world so you can like fully experience it. But this book doesn't do that. It's like, no, these are the places that are important, and we're gonna just sit in them and soak them up and look at the little tiny details that make this place meaningful. And oh, it's so good. Sorenson goes deep, not wide. And that's another key element of this book. Another aspect that I really loved was how she tells stories. Stories are super important to Idris. Idris is a bard. He tells stories. That's what he does. And so much of his quest is tied up in finding the right story and understanding the world through story. And so we get to hear these stories and hear the history of this place and of these people. And I love it so much. Oh, it's so good. Just the way that they intertwine and the way that you get to understand these people by knowing what they've gone through and what their history is. It makes it feel old. That's what this world feels so old. And not just like Remember the Alamo old, like Silmarillion old. And it's just, it's delightful. It's so good. I have nothing but praise for the world building in this book. All right, characters. So I might be in the minority here. I'm not necessarily a character reader. I've talked about this with a couple of friends, and I love characters. Characters will make or break a book for me. But my favorite element of these 5 things, my favorite element is world building. That's where I will gravitate to. But characters is a solid number 2. And I think that Sorenson's character work here is incredible. But again, it's very different from what you might be expecting when I say incredible character work, because she goes deep, not wide. And like we only have one main point of view over the whole book. It's Idris's point of view. But because we spend so much time with him, we get to like delve into who he is and where he's been and what he struggles with and the intricacies of his person. And it's really, really fun. And we don't necessarily get to do that with a lot of characters. Like in, say, I don't know, pick a book. Say in Mort by Terry Pratchett. We get to, I don't know if you can see it there. Mort. I loved Mort, by the way. Probably going to do a review of that soon. We get to go and understand like what makes Mort tick, but we also get to understand his friends and death and all of these other characters along the way. We delve into them as well. But Sorenson mainly focuses on Idris. And that's okay with me, honestly. And just that we get to delve into this one person, and we see all these other characters. There's a lot of other characters, but we see them all through Idris's eyes and how he perceives them. And so, again, deep, not wide. But Idris's arc is so good, so well crafted, because he's a hopeful character in a hopeless world. And so his struggle is, I need to find hope and wrestle with this despair and continue to hope even when hope seems lost. And part of that is me personally. I really love stories about hope, but I think it's timely. It was timely in 2020, especially in 2020, but I think it's even more timely now because it's a testament to the power of faith, really, and hope that works. And, you know, the world sure could use a little bit of hope right now. Yeah? Anyway, rambling aside, the side characters, as I mentioned, are also really, really great. And very well fleshed out, too, even if we don't get to spend time in their heads. But they really help flesh out the richness of the world. Like, most of the time is spent in Blackthorn Village. And so we get to see all of the different inner workings and what these people struggle with. And it makes the world deeper because when we see these characters, we're seeing on a micro scale what the world is struggling with and what the world needs. And so getting to watch them and their interactions is super, super good. I loved Corin because who doesn't love a grumpy mentor character? But Deirdre really stuck out to me, and she just struck me as not just a character and a friend to Idris, but as a person. And like the way she sticks with him and challenges Idris on giving up and reminds him of what's good without ever introducing doubt into their relationship. They're just healthy friends, and it makes me so happy. Like, I want Deirdre to be my friend because she's amazing. And also, bonus points for having a male and female platonic best friendship because it's so good and hardly anyone ever does it, but I love it so much. Oh, yeah. Sorry, again, rambling. But I wouldn't recommend this book because of the characters, but I think the characters are really great. Like, if someone says, oh, I'm a character reader, I read for character interactions, I wouldn't say, oh, well, read Door on Half-Bald Hill, because it's actually very dialogue light, more so than most other books that I've read. So if you're in it because I want to see a bunch of group dynamics and a bunch of people like having conflict and confrontation, there is that, but it's not the center. It's not the focus. It's supporting, and it helps build up the rest of the novel. And so I wouldn't recommend it for that, but it's also brilliant, and I think it's so well done. Okay, next bit. Prose. I have to rant. I'm so sorry, I have to do it, because the prose in this book is beyond amazing. I have nothing but glowing praise for it. some authors try to like hide their prose so the story can shine, and some authors will like just kind of downplay it so that you can move along and enjoy the story. But not Sorenson. She puts it front and center and lets it reads like a rich, dark chocolate cake. Like every single paragraph is just dripping with lush descriptions and so many like archaic words that just make it feel real. It feels real. Ugh. Because the feasts and the festivals have names. The names all sound like actual festival names pulled out of an actual myth. And every single word is like just so carefully and intentionally crafted to make the story roll forward smoothly. Like it's not, so many other books feel like new stories with old words, but this book just, it feels like an old story written for new minds. And so well done. And it's not, a lot of times this can feel clunky. It doesn't feel clunky. It flows. And I realize that prose and my ranting about it may be off-putting for fans of like more modern stuff, but it's not impenetrable or difficult to read. I'm a word nerd. I'm biased. I accept that. But if you loved or even tolerated Tolkien, you'll love Half-Bald Hill. All right, last one. I've been going through this story, and at each element, I'm sure you've heard me saying, "Oh, this is really good," but it's not what the story is really about. Or, "Oh, this is really good, but it's not the focus." This is it. Theme. Theme is where this story shines. Because the plot, the stories, the impending despair of the world, and the fears and the hopes of the characters, the delightful and arcane prose, it all serves to build together this massive clash between hope and despair, between life and death. And it's just so, it just fits, it works. Nothing is left out of place. I won't go any further, I can't, because I'm gonna spoil it. And I don't wanna do that because the way the theme works together and the way it builds to this crescendo is so perfect. It's so good. Read this book, guys. Read it. If you're worn out from reading books that feel like clumsy or ham-fisted or pointless, The Door on Half-Bald Hill will not disappoint. I'm bad at rating things, but I feel like I should rate things. I don't know. Remember what I said about saying words and watching them crash and burn? That's what's happening here. So we'll see if I keep doing it, but for now, I'd give this book a solid 9 out of 10. With 1 being kill it with fire, 5 being I have no feelings whatsoever, it was average, and 10 being this is the greatest thing I've ever read, bar none. So yeah, there are a lot of itches it doesn't scratch. Like I love me a big epic fantasy world and huge cast of characters who have a lot of screen time, and this also high page counts. It's pretty short of a book, actually. It's only, let's look here. I don't remember. It's under 300 pages, so it's a pretty quick read. Especially, it's a quick read for an epic fantasy fan. Let's put it that way. But everything it does so perfectly. So yeah, I'm finished, I think. Let me know what you thought of this video down in the comments. As you can tell, I'm still trying to figure out how this works and what makes a good review and a good video. So let me know what you thought worked and what you thought didn't work. And I would love to hear your feedback. So yeah, subscribe if you enjoyed, like it, share the video, and look forward to seeing you soon.